My name is Abraham Mamela. I am passionate about communicating science to the public. I believe that sharing knowledge produced by research from universities and think tanks can improve the quality of life for Africans. But we are being submerged as information pours down upon us. African urban citizens are being flooded with information through thousands of networks, newspapers, billboards, advertising, and emails. And business is aggressive about capturing our attention. So where do science messages, the ones that could really solve our societal problems, fit into this deluge? Well, it is survival of the fittest, and the fittest survive by making their information exceptionally accessible, appealing, and engaging. Researchers must compete for the attention and participation of audiences. The public need to be convinced that investing in research and development can shape the business and the politics of the continent in a positive way.
Science is a part of everything that we do in our lives. It's a part of the technology that we use, it's a part of the healthcare that we receive, it's a part of the medicines that make us feel better. It's part of the businesses that drive us.
African scientists have the challenge of building and transforming societies into knowledge economies.
In a lot of countries like the America and in Europe, they're knowledge-based economies, and the knowledge that we gain from science enables us to kind of make money, learn more about the world, create new things that allow us as humans to kind of progress.
But at this moment, it seems like the journey is impossible. Because the knowledge they have to share faces the challenge of having to compete in this information era.
In the old days, used to sit on the dusty shelves of libraries and now sits in great databases somewhere else.
As scientists, very often we're not very good at bringing science out of academia.
As a general statement about research dissemination, I think there's often a huge gulf between researchers, academics, and people out there, people outside of the university.
What's difficult about science is not so much the concepts, but the language of science, which is very mathematical. So you have to use analogies, and you have to use something that people can understand.
Very few lay people will even bother to plow their way through an academic article. And in fact, such kind of articles are, in my experience, the subject of great derision and laughter among people outside the academic community.
And this barrier between the research knowledge is also attributed to the nature of operation and systems within the academia. The system is seemingly not designed to allow scientists to share their knowledge with society, but only amongst themselves.
The best way for a university to earn money is to make sure that your academics are writing lots of academic articles in accredited journals and pumping out the postgraduate students. Now, it distorts the entire educational and research environment in ways that I think are incredibly detrimental to the process of research and communication of important information that comes out of research.
So the masses are in a different sphere as that of scientists. They don't get it. They don't get why research development is important.
And sometimes also people don't quite get that science is everywhere.
When it comes to money, people all know money. They know how it's going to affect them because it hits you right in the pocket. When it comes to science, I think people kind of know that it's to do with themselves, but sometimes there's that weird disconnect. So
until people realize that S, T, and I, science, technology, and innovation, are one, and that we engage with it every single day, there's no escaping from it, then I think people will just begin to appreciate it a bit more.
Explaining a complicated subject like cancer to a patient, giving them a booklet full of complicated information can be really overwhelming sometimes.
But what is science communication? Well, I met with science communication people. scientists themselves and artists to discuss this and to get ideas.
Science communication, as opposed to just communication, is when you communicate scientific evidence or scientific information that's been generated by researchers or scientists in a particular field.
Communicating science is very important because a lot of people always, particularly in my field, science communication, always say that science is never finished until it's communicated, and a lot of scientists say this as well.
It's good when people engage in discussions based on evidence. So as opposed to people debating on myths and misconceptions, you're actually debating on evidence.
And I think that's very important because that's ultimately how science is going to affect our lives, if actually everyone can understand it and realize what's going on. Also because in the end research is mostly funded by public funding, so I feel also we kind of own it to the public.
The IDRC Science Journalism Award is meant to explore better ways of communicating science and disseminating the knowledge produced by research to people in Africa, be it policymakers, business people, NGO people, and everyone else. Well, I explored how cartoons, political or comics, could be used to communicate complex subjects. So I think that cartoons are an effective way to disseminate knowledge, because the nature of this art appeals to most people and cannot be ignored. Because they are funny or eye-catching, and they work in many levels.
So it's very much about satire, and satire is about bringing a light into things that people are not comfortable speaking about making fun, particularly of the rich and powerful, politicians and wealthy people, the pompous people in society.
The humor in it helps you remember it, you laugh about it, and it encourages conversation. So people start talking about it.
Comics are the ideal way to represent these very complex subjects, like scientific subjects.
Politicians take note of it because they're in big newspapers, and as I say, the powerful thing about that is that someone can, in one political cartoon, very pithily get across a message.
They are perceived as something very simple, very approachable, so like people of all ages always can read comics and can get engaged with them.
You can kind of tell a story in a way that combines words and pictures that someone could easily look at in a minute or less than a minute and understand the flow of that story and that narrative.
So cartooning is cutting-edge journalism. Cartoonists are special people. They are artists, intellectuals, and poets. This art is intense. It is expensive because it takes a lot of time. Creating cartoons requires imagination, skill, and a lot of research.
You need to have two things going to hold any audience's attention. The first is that you've got to have strong characters that people care about. The second is you've got to have a little bit of a dramatic narrative.
I do write poetry, but this time I draw the poetry. So I make people have a different consciousness about the news that they're reading.
The subject matter of a lot of cartoon strips is quite frivolous.
So I look at a news item, think about it. After digesting it, I ask myself, what do I have to say about this topic? What do I want to say to the world that will change the way they think about the topic or change the way they behave?
You do need to be quite bold, and you've got to decide what truth you want to shine on a particular subject.
Emotionally, the news will affect me in a certain way. After it's affected me emotionally, I ask myself, why am I angry? Or why am I embarrassed? Or why do I feel gleeful or glad?
I'm a great believer in the power of the imagination.
In a way, if you just read something and it really strikes your imagination, you're learning something.
The art they create need to get to the core of the culture of the audience they want to reach, their norms and values. So if a cartoonist wants to communicate an important message, he or she will work with images in the language that a particular audience will relate to. But there are also lots of universals that will resonate to most people.
I think the important thing with any medium is that you've got to create strong characters.
Storytelling is a hugely effective means of communicating a message.
Your interesting character needs to have a challenge which it looks like they won't overcome, and then in the course of the comic they overcome it. So you get involved wanting to know, will the person succeed? Will the person fail?
And it's more effective to tell the story about a child who drank paraffin than it is to say children drink paraffin.
What's the best picture to depict this message with? And usually it's with things that are familiar with people, familiar in their lives. Either common sayings that they have, popular beliefs, popular movies.
I try really to find visual metaphors for everything I can. Then of course some things you need to explain them with words.
You could take that information from a very complex data set, one that's very hard to get hold of, and you could put it into a cartoon, and that could be effective.
A picture says 1,000 words, and cartoonists know this. As for scientists, they should constantly look for innovative hooks with which to catch their audience. Otherwise, most of it will face a delete button or a trash can. We want the messages of good science to be communicated in popular ways. Let bad science face the delete button, because good science has found the best way to survive the cutthroat information era.
I think one of the things that one needs to avoid is deciding everything about the project before you've engaged with the stakeholders and the people that you're going to be working with.
Thinking carefully about what your message is that you're trying to get across, who you're talking to, and why you're trying to get it across is quite important. Find out what is the social level, what's the human level that people want to know about a particular piece of medical research, and that's the angle at which people get interested, and then they will start talking to you.
Research is very important, and you need to have an authenticity that can only come from good research.
All we have to do as Kenya, for example, or as Africans is just develop that appreciation for science and recognition that it's everywhere.
I just wish that the government would put more resources in and make it obligatory for academic research and knowledge to be made publicly accessible in forms that are digestible.
We engage with it every day, and if we could just begin to do a lot with it, example research and investing in research, then we can benefit a lot. We reap more fruits from it.
A lot of attention needs to go into finding popular ways of disseminating knowledge and making it accessible. But the problem is that there is no reward for that within the current intellectual system, the current system of intellectual production and dissemination.
I think it would be a shame if what the scientists were doing in their laboratories and out in the field was not in some way joined up with what the public wants to know.
So I think research managers should be beholden to finding effective mediums that are very close to the lives of the people. To communicate science, they should explore the arts further and build strong links with artists and creative people. For me, cartoons are the most compelling medium and would get across science messages in the most powerful way. Cartoonists are intellectuals who can get to the hearts of the science and the hearts of the people.